Put your hands together for Linda Adams, Chair, Climate Action Reserve Board of Directors.
Good afternoon, everyone. Everyone took a little break. I don't want you to miss this very important panel. I'm very happy this afternoon to be introducing this panel. We're going to hear from local community members, Indigenous voices, and project developers to discuss their projects, what they mean to communities, the impacts they've had, the need for continued support, and the often misplaced criticism leveled at many projects. And our moderator today is Johanna Depenthal with Cool Effect, and then she will be introducing the panel. So I hope you will enjoy this panel. Thank you so much, Johanna.
Okay, well, I hope everyone can hear me all right. It sounds like it's working. Linda, thank you so much for that fabulous introduction. Everyone, thank you so much for being here. Good afternoon. I've been looking forward to this conversation all week, and I hope that you enjoy it as much as I do. We're gonna have a pretty dynamic conversation here. I'll start out by doing a quick introduction of our panelists. As a reminder, you can find their full bios in the app under the speakers. So I'm gonna kind of summarize things a little bit so that everyone has more time to talk. We'll also do a couple questions and responses likely in Spanish, so we may have some on-screen translation. And we'll also have a few videos from some projects to show, so that'll be really enjoyable as well. And with no further ado, we are very grateful to everyone for coming. We know a lot of people came from very far away, generally not alone, sometimes with other members of their community or their organization or the next generation. So thank you all for being here. And thank you to everyone for coming, because we know you probably also don't all live in Los Angeles. So, all right. We're gonna start out with Bryan here to my left. Bryan is the program director for the National Indian Carbon Coalition, which provides education and technical assistance to tribal nation, Alaska Native villages and corporations, Native Hawaiian organizations, and First Nations in Canada on the development of nature-based solutions. He is a member of the Oneida tribe of Wisconsin, Nation of Wisconsin, excuse me, and has an extensive legal background as well as several other degrees, and served as tribal attorney for the Ho-Chunk Nation Department of Justice in Wisconsin, where he specialized in land acquisition. He lives with his wife and 2 children in Green Bay and serves on a number of climate solution task groups and boards. Gregorio is a member of the indigenous community of Nuevo San Juan Parangaricutiro in Michoacan, Mexico. He's an agronomist with a specialist in forests and a master in sustainability. And he currently works as the coordinator of the Forest Carbon Project in his community, as well as is the legal representative of the project development organization Grupo de Gestión Social, Agrario y Forestal, SC. He's committed to continuing strengthening and expanding the project in his community and to developing projects with the highest possible integrity, fairness, and sustainability for ejidos and indigenous communities in Mexico. Maria Luisa, better known as Chea, is here representing the Unidad de Conservacion y Desarrollo Forestal Integral Topia in the state of Durango. She's worked with her organization since 1990, supporting forest management and programs for apiculture, medicinal plants, and women's community businesses. She's worked with a number of civil organizations in soil, water, and forestry conservation, including through Mexico's Payments for Water Services program. Currently, she coordinates 11 car IFM projects in Durango, which not only generate employment, but also strengthens the social fabric of communities. Rosendo is the co-director of ICICO, which is Spanish for the Integrator of Campesino and Indigenous Communities of Oaxaca, which is an NGO focused on the environmental, social, and economic development of its 12-member communities. He's an environmental scientist by training and began working on IFM projects in 2014, which is when ICICO piloted the Climate Action Reserve's first Mexico project in the community of San Juan La Chao in Oaxaca. He's had a role in developing over 35 projects, primarily in Oaxaca, but also in other states in southern Mexico and in the Yucatan Peninsula. As an organization, ICICO is working on developing water capture, wildlife monitoring, biodiversity corridors, and has a number of ongoing research partnerships with universities in the US and Mexico. And last but not least, Jack is here as the Vice President of Land and Resources for the Chugach Alaska Corporation. He manages nearly 1 million acres of land on their behalf. And the Chugach Alaska Corporation is an Alaska Native corporation, which I recently learned is approximately the equivalent of a recognized tribe in the lower 48 states. He has a degree in natural resource management and retired from the Alaska Department of Natural Resources, where he spent over 3 decades working with state parks. He lives in Alaska, in Anchorage, with his wife, Michelle. He has 2 adult children. And he loves spending time outside, which I would never have guessed based on the rest of his biography. So, since we have such a wide geographic representation, I wanted to start out by asking each of our panelists, even before we get into the specifics of organizations and projects, to talk a little bit about their community, the people, the land, just to paint a little bit of a picture for us. And we're going to go in geographic order from the south to the north. So we will start with Rosendo. If you could tell us a little bit about the communities and lands with which you live and work.
Well, first of all, thank you for the invitation to participate in this plenary session. It's good to see that there is a good number of the attendees of this North American Carbon World. As Johanna was explaining, I work for a Mexican NGO, which is community-owned. We work with 6 ethnic groups at this moment. And as you can imagine, it's kind of difficult, not difficult, but it's complicated sometimes to work with so many ethnic groups, just because Oaxaca is very particular in the sense that communities and particularly ethnic groups have a lot, they date back to pre-colony times that they were living in these areas. So they have a big root on their territories, and they have a very, very particular cosmovision and a very particular way to manage their ecosystems. And if you multiply that by the number of people that we work with and the number of communities that we work with, it becomes challenging sometimes to explain something that it's very, very technical, as is the carbon offset markets, and try to simplify most of the information for the community in order for them to understand what are we trying to talk about and the message that we're trying to convey. And yeah, it's a very fulfilling job beyond the challenges that it has, just because you get to see how people really cares for their land, really cares for their natural resources, and also really looks forward to have the same level of ecosystems and the same level of ecosystemic services, and they try to inherit those ecosystem services down to their grandsons and the grandsons of their grandsons. So it's a very, very fulfilling job again, and also it's something that we are trying to strengthen by collaborating with different academia actors and also with the proceeds from carbon offsets.
Thank you. Okay, Gregorio, platíquenos un poco de su comunidad. And I think since I'm not sure that we have live translation, We'll just go slowly and I'll do a quick recap of key points. Voy a resumir brevemente lo que usted dice después.
Buenas tardes a todos. Mi nombre es Gregorio, miembro de la comunidad indígena de San Juan Nuevo en Michoacán. Pues muy contento de estar aquí con ustedes porque para nosotros llevar un mensaje a nuestra comunidad directamente del lugar donde se están realizando los protocolos, las reglas, la información necesaria es muy importante. Vengo de una comunidad indígena de la cultura purépecha en Michoacán y esta comunidad pues ya tiene más de 40 años trabajando los bosques y pues esto pues nos ha permitido un modo de vida, nos ha permitido generar empleos, nos ha permitido pues crecer bajo una industria.
Pausa. He says it's a great pleasure to be here with you all. It's very important to come from my community all the way to the place where the methodologies and things are developed, which I think is a very strong point. It is a Purépecha community, and they have about 40 years of experience with improved forest management.
Comenzamos nuestro proyecto de captura de carbono en el 2020 y aproximadamente vamos cumpliendo 5 años de experiencia con este proyecto que para nosotros ha sido muy importante.
Ya se fue. All right, some translation details. Sigue adelante, por favor.
Cuando comenzamos con este proyecto no sabíamos a ciencia cierta qué iba a pasar con nosotros, si realmente iba a tener un beneficio o qué iba a pasar con nosotros ahí en nuestra comunidad. Ahora entendemos mucho más y pues eso nos fortalece nuestra manera de pensar y nuestra forma de continuar conservando pues, nuestros recursos forestales.
When we began the project, we didn't really know if it would pay off, if there would be benefit, and now that we've come through the process, we find that there is, and it strengthens our manner of continuing to conserve our natural resources.
En nuestra comunidad somos 1,254 miembros y son 1,254 familias que se benefician día con día de todos nuestros recursos forestales. Ahora el impacto que tiene este proyecto también va reflejado y representa a todo ese núcleo de las personas.
Our community is made up of 1,254 people, which represents about that many families who are part of the project and benefiting from the project.
Ahora recientemente pues vamos terminando un proceso pues muy importante de ajustes al protocolo en las erratas y clarificaciones y pues nos ha llevado un tiempo que para nosotros fue reflexivo, pero este tiempo ya haber cumplido todo este proceso nos genera nuevamente confianza, nos genera una nueva oportunidad para nuestra comunidad.
We've been coming through a stage of time in which we've been updating the project with accordance with the latest errata and clarifications of the protocol, which has been a time of a lot of reflection, but now that we've passed through this stage, it gives us a new confidence in our project. Bueno.
Pues no me queda más que agradecer que esta invitación que nos hacen el día de hoy. También vengo en compañía de pues nuestro comisariado, nuestro equipo de concejales, que para nosotros siempre ha sido, o yo he tenido mucho respaldo como coordinador, porque nuestra comunidad es muy grande socialmente y requiere siempre de que esté bien informada paso a paso que se ha dado. Y yo agradezco a todas las personas de la comunidad que me han acompañado el día de hoy, porque eso refuerza lo que la reserva promueve, que es la fortaleza de las salvaguardas sociales, y para mí es muy importante que este acompañamiento y poder brindar esta información que hoy nos vamos a llevar.
To close, I would like to thank you all for the invitation to be here. I'm also here in the company of the comisariado of my community and of a group of counselors of the community, and it's extremely important for us to be informed and to be paying attention to everything that's going on, and the aspect of the social safeguards are very strong in our community, and that's a very important aspect. So thank you also to them for accompanying me as we come here today. Bueno. Chea, platícanos un poco.
Muchas gracias, buenas tardes. Bueno, pues para mí es un placer estar aquí como ejidataria. Soy ejidataria de un ejido que tiene un proyecto de captura de carbono, se llama Valle de Topia, pero al mismo tiempo soy vocera de todos los proyectos que están dentro de la Unidad Forestal Topia y también como parte de ser desarrollador de los proyectos.
For me, it's a pleasure to be here this afternoon. I'm here both as an ejidataria, like an official title-holding member of my community, Valle de Topia, and also as the spokeswoman for the 11 projects that we represent through my organization.
Nuestros proyectos están en el norte del país, en un estado muy bello que se llama Durango. Estamos dentro de lo que es la Sierra Madre Occidental. Eso nos permite tener diversos microclimas y por ello pues tenemos unos bosques de pino y encino que están muy densos. También tenemos matorrales, zonas de transición. Ahorita les vamos a presentar un video y más o menos se van a dar una idea de cómo es nuestra tierra. El hecho de que tengamos 3 microclimas o 4 nos permite que nuestros proyectos sean diversos, ya que la gente que vivimos ahí tenemos oportunidad de, aparte del proyecto de captura de carbono, tener frutas, tenemos quesos, nosotros allá nos alimentamos de la carne seca. Nuestra comida tradicional en el estado de Durango son las gorditas de maíz.
I come from a very beautiful state in the north of Mexico called Durango. We have pine and oak forests. There are a lot of hills and a lot of canyons. There are a lot of ecological transition zones and 3 to 4 microclimates that result in very ecologically rich projects. We have a special dish called like carnes secas. I would have to research to understand exactly what that is. Somehow it involves dried meat, and also something called gorditas, which are these very delicious corn dough fried, things.
Tengo que comentarles lo bonito que se vive allá. Nosotros somos muy hospitalarios. En Durango somos muy querendones. Siempre que nos visitan tratamos de apapacharlos, que se sientan que están en su casa.
We're extremely hospitable. We are sometimes almost overbearing in our hospitality, and when people come, we just kind of want to squeeze them. Yes.
Y derivado de esto, nuestros proyectos, tenemos en las asambleas una gobernanza muy bonita. Nosotros no batallamos por las salvaguardas, por hacer los trabajos de campo. Nosotros en Durango nos gusta vestirnos muy ranchero, los hombres con sombrero. Somos gente de a caballo.
We work together in our community assemblies. We don't complain too much about doing collective work in the field. There's a lot still of very dressing with, cowboy hats and a lot of sort of ranch style in Durango.
Les comento todo esto porque normalmente cuando hablamos de México siempre ven playa o ven cactus, pero nosotros en Durango tenemos mucho bosque. Les comentaba que mucho pino, encino, nuestras dimensiones de nuestro bosque, aún tenemos dimensiones muy grandes y esto nos permite tener proyectos con una adicionalidad que es el éxito de los proyectos que tenemos en Durango.
I mention this because a lot of people, when they think about Mexico, think about beaches, they think about cactus, and they may not realize that in Durango we have these beautiful pine oak forests with very large dimension trees. And this really brings a lot of richness and additionality to our projects.
Entonces, quiero decirles que están todos invitados. Cuando gusten visitar un proyecto de Durango, busquen a la Unidad Forestal Topia y gracias por la oportunidad que nos dan de hablar de lo que es el estado de Durango y conozcan un poquito más de México.
And so I'd like to invite all of you to visit Durango, and when you come, you can look us up at our organization and our projects and come see it for yourself. Now, we do have translation now, which is fabulous. Creo que vamos a pasar a su video. I also need to apologize to Gregorio because I skipped his video in my excitement. So, vamos a ver su video, usted. We'll watch Chea's video, and then I think we'll circle back to watch Gregorio's video, and then we'll continue on. So, my apologies for that oversight. So, let's go ahead and watch Chea's video, which should be the second one we have lined up.
En las tierras de Durango, México, donde la naturaleza y la comunidad se entrelazan, surge la Unidad de Conservación y Desarrollo Forestal Integral, Topia SC, como un referente en manejo forestal comunitario y sustentable. Somos una organización que combina innovación, responsabilidad y compromiso para proteger nuestros bosques y mejorar la calidad de vida de las comunidades. Nuestros proyectos de carbono son un pilar fundamental de nuestra labor, con 11 proyectos activos en 3 agregados: CARC 1502 Topia, CARC 1583 Tamazula y CARC 2053 del Fuerte. Contribuimos a la captura de CO2 y a la mitigación del cambio climático. Los proyectos de carbono desarrollados por Unidad de Conservación y Desarrollo Forestal Integral Topia van más allá de la conservación ambiental. Están transformando vidas. Hemos fortalecido el tejido social, promoviendo la equidad de género y la participación activa de todos los miembros de la comunidad.
Hace un año que empezó el programa ese de dióxido de carbono aquí y yo la verdad lo creí imposible. En trabajo social AMAFIR nos está beneficiando en ayudar a las escuelas, para el agua y para cuidar el bosque. Te enseñas cómo trabajar la paja de pino, hay oportunidad de poderla trabajar, generar pues, dinero, ayudarte, ¿no?
Hemos logrado un mayor involucramiento de los habitantes en la conservación y el manejo sostenible de sus recursos. Esto no solo mejora la calidad de vida, sino que también fortalece el sentido de pertenencia y la responsabilidad hacia el medio ambiente. Cada proyecto que implementamos es un paso hacia un futuro donde el desarrollo y la conservación van de la mano. El momento de actuar es ahora. Sumar acciones hoy significa proteger nuestro planeta y mejorar la vida de quienes lo habitan. Juntos, podemos lograr un impacto que trascienda generaciones. Unidad de Conservación y Desarrollo Forestal Integral Topia. Desarrolladores de proyectos de carbono.
So now you all have a view of where you can go when you go to Durango. And let's go ahead and watch Gregorio's video, which should be the first one that we originally lined up.
Mi nombre es Felipe Misita Velázquez, presidente del Comisariado de Bienes Comunales de nuestra comunidad indígena. Comentarles que estamos convencidos que el proyecto de captura de carbono es un proyecto muy importante para todos los integrantes de nuestra comunidad. Hoy, que soy presidente del comisariado, es una obligación de un servidor darle continuidad al proyecto, porque sabemos que es un proyecto en beneficio para nuestras familias y para nuestros hijos. Este proyecto de captura lo vamos a realizar de una manera transparente y en las próximas asambleas es una obligación de su servidor realizarlo como se vaya pidiendo día a día. Por ello, aunque aún no nos ha llegado el recurso, nosotros seguimos cultivando nuestros bosques, seguimos trabajando, cuidando nuestros manantiales, dándole vida a nuestra gente a través de un oxígeno puro.
Yo en lo personal veo muy bueno este proyecto que traemos de los bonos de carbono porque es un compromiso que tenemos para todos los comuneros en toda la comunidad y buscar alternativas mucho mejores, dejarles a nuestros hijos, nuestros nietos bien profundamente arraigado para que ellos mejoren todavía mucho más esto que se está haciendo en la comunidad. Debemos de inculcarles mucho a ellos para que cuiden el bosque, de incendios forestales, plagas, enfermedades y que nunca se nos acabe este bosque.
Buenos días, mi nombre es José Manuel Escuarao. Como presidente de Vigilancia y como comunero, les digo, este proyecto de bono de carbono nos ha beneficiado el bienestar de nuestra comunidad y de nuestros comuneros para el medio ambiente de la comunidad. Nosotros hemos evitado el cambio de suelo para nosotros mismos cuidar, ya que estos últimos 5 años nos ha beneficiado mucho este proyecto. Y este proyecto es muy importante para nosotros y para nuestros hijos y para nuestros nietos.
Mi nombre es Estanislao Gutiérrez Rodríguez. En esta ocasión pertenezco yo a la mesa directiva de la comunidad. Y en esto de los bonos de carbono es también para nosotros irle dando importancia a lo que es el cuidado del medio ambiente. Nosotros como comunidad vamos a darle importancia más a este proyecto de bonos de carbono para que nuestros comuneros sean beneficiados más que nada, y así al ser beneficiados tienen más oportunidad o más ganas de cuidar el medio ambiente.
Nosotros realizamos, como mujeres en nuestra comunidad, realizamos este tipo de plantas para el bosque.
Ojalá que este proyecto de bonos de carbono siga adelante para que nosotros podamos realizar estas labores.
Con el recurso de los bonos de carbono hemos invertido como a las vigilantes, como a los incendios, como a las reforestaciones, y enseñarle, como a uno lo enseñaron nuestros padres, enseñarle a nuestros hijos cómo hacer los trabajos para inversión del bosque y del medio ambiente.
Buenos días, mi nombre es Gregorio Anguiano Chavalía, el coordinador del proyecto de captura de carbono de nuestra comunidad. Hablar de este proyecto a lo largo de estos 5 años que hemos adquirido como experiencia ha sido muy buena para todos nosotros. Hay algo muy importante, la motivación a continuar con la conservación de los bosques, ya que Michoacán presenta una alta tasa de deforestación por el cambio de uso de suelo del aguacate. Aquí a nuestros alrededores de la comunidad también tenemos ese problema latente, pero la comunidad, las personas, al verse motivadas y comprometidas con el proyecto de captura de carbono, pues ven que es mejor conservar y seguir con nuestro proyecto. Pues agradecemos a toda la comunidad, a la reserva, ahora mucho más, porque el estar apegados a la reglamentación internacional pues nos hace más responsables, más disciplinados, y necesitamos que nos ayuden, que nos favorezcan un poquito más para el cuidado de nuestros bosques. A través de este mensaje, este video, yo quiero resaltar la importancia de que los pueblos de México podemos participar en el mercado voluntario internacional del carbono, porque es una alternativa buena para contribuir a la inversión de la conservación de nuestros recursos forestales.
So now that we've done a quick tour through Oaxaca, Michoacán, and Durango, we're working our way up. So Bryan, why don't you tell us about the communities you come from and work with?
Suguliyako, I greet you and I thank you in my traditional language as a member of the Oneida Nation of Wisconsin. And I thank Climate Action Reserve for being here today to talk about our experiences working with tribal nations and indigenous communities throughout the United States and Canada. So our organization, the National Indian Carbon Coalition, is a tribally led not-for-profit organization based out of Little Canada, Minnesota. Myself, Bryan Van Stippen, I am the program director for the National Indian Carbon Coalition, and as a tribal member of the Oneida Nation of Wisconsin, I live and reside outside of our reservation lands in Green Bay, Wisconsin. So we serve these tribal nations, the 574 federally recognized tribes, 66 state-recognized tribes, other Native Hawaiian organizations, the Alaska Native Villages and corporations that are recognized a little bit differently in that region than the continental United States federally recognized tribes, as well as the 606 First Nations in Canada. So that's the region that we want to focus on for the work that we do at the National Indian Carbon Coalition in exploring opportunities to protect and preserve these tribal and indigenous natural resources rather than extract or exploit these natural resources. We saw in those two videos from other groups of how looking at ways to enter these lands into carbon sequestration projects are important for these tribal and indigenous communities because of most of the time some of the ways to derive revenue was easily to extract or exploit those natural resource bases, cut down your trees to plant agricultural crops, cut down trees to put in the timber industry, mine your lands for resources. A lot of times those revenue streams never really did come back into the indigenous communities' hands. They always went to outside third-party contractors or to the other organizations that were doing those activities. Those funds never really truly get funneled back into the indigenous landowners' hands, which is always a concern as a tribal member and for our tribal organizations and entities that we engage with. So we have found with our work at the National Indian Carbon Coalition that engaging directly with those tribal nations, indigenous communities, that if we bring them into the conversation on the front end with a lot of our partners, a lot of NGOs that want to do this work, and we can show a true benefit as to how these projects can be productive and be beneficial for those communities, that the communities will want to enter into these project types. And so we do also have a video that we've recently produced with a project with the Boys Fort Band of Chippewa in northern Minnesota that we think can highlight how these projects, bringing together the partnerships, especially getting engagement with the community members, leadership from the tribe, staff members from the tribe, bringing together, creating a working group to make these decisions. Because at the National Indian Carbon Coalition, we just put together and facilitate the conversation, guide the membership, leadership, and staff through the decision-making process. We do not make any of the decisions. They are the leaders. They understand how to manage their lands appropriately and correctly. We just, again, want to step them through the process on how to design these projects appropriately for their land bases. And again, we think that this model works. We saw two videos where I think highlight the opportunities for indigenous communities. And again, we believe that this is going to be a pathway forward for many tribal nations and indigenous communities to protect and preserve these land bases over time. I saw that in here a couple times again in those videos, talking about youth in Indian country. We talk about 7 generations ahead. That's what we always look for. How do we preserve our land bases? How do we preserve our natural resources now for our future generations? And so that's something that we always want to focus on when we're looking at how we design these projects for those tribal nations and indigenous communities.
Thank you, Bryan. Let's go ahead and watch that video. It's a little bit of a dive through a different climate and go back to winter. So let's see it.
To be able to walk out your front door and harvest your groceries is pretty good. To be able to get my fish, my deer, my moose, my rabbits. If I need to get fur, there's plenty of fur bearers around to get that. My name's William Isham. I'm from the Boys Fort Reservation. 55 years old, living here my entire life. I was a logger for 22 years and working with DNR now for 16. There's not many Native communities in Minnesota that have the environment that we have here in Boys Fort. In my opinion, we're taking really good care of the environment here with the circle of all the animals from our black bear, our wolves, our moose, our deer, our rabbits, our ruffed grouse, our geese, our ducks, our wild rice, and then the medicines that they also collect. What I'm hoping is with this carbon project, we create the habitat where we have these trees growing for a long time and we still have state, federal, and banned logging, which will create habitat for the smaller stuff because they need to eat the young browse. But we also have the thick timber blocks that are going to hold for cover and any nesting birds that will be using those big trees.
The carbon project has been a huge development for Boys Fort. We used to manage around 44,000 acres between allotment and trust lands. Now we're looking at 71,000 acres under management with the new acquire of the carbon project lands. And this started in 2021 when the land was acquired. Now into 2025, we're writing a forest management plan for the carbon project, and we're starting to get hard numbers that we can produce to the people and to the tribal council. So huge thing, the ILTF and NIC are supporting tribes. Boys Fort is one of them, is that the reacquisition of this land is being wholly supported by the Carbon Project, and the revenue that's brought in by the Carbon Project will secure that this land stays in Bois Forte hands into the future for generations and generations. The hardest part of this job is getting to the work, getting to the plots, getting to the stands that you want to cruise. It may be inaccessible, but we need to get to the woods. We need to see what the woods looks like. So we learn new methods. A lot of people would think we use snowshoes, but a lot of the woods is too thick for snowshoes. So we've learned to operate snowmobiles in a manner that we can drive them into almost anything. We have timber in mind for carbon production. I guess the support to grow these large trees will affect everything from the micro to the macro. As animals nest and there's more prey, you'll have a higher population of predators as well. All of the small birds are going to want larger diameter trees to nest in. And so these trees that are regenerating are really small are good for small birds to create little cavity nests to lay their eggs in. But as you start to get to woodpeckers and owls and a little bit more of the medium-sized birds, they really desire a larger tree to burrow in and to feel safe in. And as for the large animals, they need young cut area to browse, but they also need large undisturbed forested areas for winter cover or for summer cover. If it's hot and humid or it's hot and dry, they need areas that are covered well with shade. And then also in the winter, those areas that are covered with shade don't take snowfall underneath. So it's an area for deer and moose to recover from the deep snowpack. As this timber grows and falls down and becomes laying biomass, there'll be mushrooms growing on it. That mushroom will spread that, there'll be more fungus, and you'll have more of these medicinal plants, pipsissewa, wintergreen, bearberry, that do exist in areas of the forest, but just aren't getting the most nutrients and the best conditions to grow.
Everything is food to us. Everything is medicine. Everything is protection. Everything can be used as a tool. So when it comes to our traditional practices and how that encompasses everything that we do, even in modern days, it comes down to preserving our ways of life. So the community aspect of the carbon banking project is to involve the community as much as we can and to put the cultural spin on things, so to speak, so that we can get back to what we used to do before we were colonized. It's a way for us to preserve our forestry and our vegetation and our wildlife and our protection, basically, to make sure that we have that in the years to come for the next generations and the generations after that, so we can keep these traditions alive and strong and within our grasp so that we don't lose who we are. We ingrain ourselves so deeply into the balance of things when it comes to life and death, and that weaves itself into respecting not just each other, but respecting the wildlife, the plants, the sun, the moon, everything that makes us alive. But these trees around here, they protect us. If it's one thing that I want people to know, is that this project is ensuring our future. We have the ability and we have the freedom to do what we need to do traditionally as far as harvesting, hunting, learning. We still use things like, for example, the water. The lake up here is considered very, very powerful, and we are always meant to use the lake water whenever we really, really need a prayer to work, or if we're really, really sick and we really need to get better.
Where you're at, the environment can be messed up in a heartbeat. The guys we had before, 20 some years ago, they would totally freeze the lake right to the bottom, which then would help the rice germinate better. What I found out was we were losing our muskrats, we lost our fish. I took it upon myself not to completely freeze it to the bottom because I was still getting germination. So I keep it at a medium so we don't lose oxygen on the fish. Our fish population is starting to rebound. We've probably got maybe 200% more of our muskrats are back. The fish and the muskrats help stir up the bottom of the lake so we can get our wild rice. When I'm testing the water, I'm testing for changes in the water. Hopefully I never see them, because if I do, that means there's a problem. Don't take nothing for granted, because it can change. And if you work towards something, and it's work, you can't just say, oh, I want to do it. I mean, we've been working on this for a while now, and we're going to be working on it for a while yet.
If you're not in a site that's been noticeably cut within the past 50 years, depending where you are, there's certain areas that may not have been touched by anyone alive, so that it's a real gritting feeling where it was for me. Some of those trees might be older than the U.S. itself. For sure, older than Minnesota was a state. And the old trees have a role, the young undergrowth has a role to the wildlife. wildlife and its communication to the people of Bois Forte has a role, whether they're hunting, collecting, gathering. We're using new science and technology to measure the valuation of this program. And what we're left with is a real innovative product that allows you to expand on your roots in the past. You're allowed to hold a foot deeper into the past when you're looking backwards by reacquiring traditional land, by doing it responsibly through responsible stewardship with new ideas. So it allows the Bois Forte people who have a connection to the past, but they also still value innovation forward. It allows those two values to be connected.
We're looking at improved forest management methods because we really want this land to heal, and we really want this land to be the best that it can be for 7 generations into the future. Because the work we do today probably won't be seen by us into our old age. So a lot of the things we do day to day are for the next generation and for the generation after that. The forest will have a chance to heal itself and to regenerate and to become a healthy, natural state of forest that might have existed before pre-settlement. It's hard to say, obviously that was hundreds of years ago, but that's the goal of this project, is to create a healthy, sustainable forest. This is going to set up, hopefully, a forest that generations can use and be proud of, and they'll have a history to follow on how Bois Forte bought their land back, managed it in their own project, and was successful.
So I just have to say that it was 20 below zero when they shot that video. So those guys out there were out there all day long so we could get all of those shots. So I really appreciated their time and effort to make sure that our camera team and our crew was kept warm and happy to get all the shots that they did. So again, I appreciate your time, Yako.
And absolutely last but not least, let's go to Jack and hear a little bit about the Chugach.
Do you want to do Rosendo?
We started with him, so we'll circle back.
Okay, all right.
Go ahead.
The Chugach region is along the northern Gulf of Alaska. It's a coastal region, and it consists of the northernmost temperate rainforest in North America. So forest consists of Sitka spruce and western hemlock, and this is an area, our region is an area that's home to, or includes mountains and glaciers and fjords, and it's a coastal, a lot of coastal waterways. So the Chugach people have historically relied on the waterway for transportation. For thousands of years, they've lived in this area along the northern Gulf of Alaska, and it's the home to the Supiaq Aleut, Eyak Athabascan, and Tlingit Indians, and it's been a center of trade just due to its geographic location. And we've have a water-based culture historically that's reliant on the ocean, shorelines, and land for food. And salmon and seals are two examples of how the Chugach people have relied on the land. But in order to understand a little bit about what an Alaska Native Corporation is, I work for Chugach Alaska Corporation. It's one of the 12 regional corporations in Alaska. When the United States acquired Alaska, native claims issue hadn't been resolved, and over time, Alaska went from being a territory to becoming a state in 1959, and even at statehood, the native claims weren't settled. And so, in the late 1960s, oil was discovered on the north slope of Alaska, and it was determined that a pipeline would need to be built from the north slope 800 miles to an ocean-free port, or an ocean port, ice-free port along the coast in Valdez. And in order to build that line, the native claims would need to be resolved. So really, it was the state land selections and oil that really were the two drivers for resolving the native claims. In 1971, the Congress passed the Alaska Native Claims Settlement Act, and they settled the native claims with land and money. And unlike the way things worked in the lower 48, Congress decided to set up the native claims settlement in a corporate structure. And so it created 12 regional corporations, which Chugach, I work for one of the regional corporations, and then 200 plus village corporations. And so there's kind of a more or less a corporate structure for the land management in Alaska, native land management. And so unlike the lower 48 where the tribes own the land in Alaska, the native corporations own land. And our corporation has about 1 million acres that we manage along the northern Gulf of Alaska. And our corporation's mission really has 3 components. One, profitability. It's a corporation. It needs to be successful and generate revenue. So profitability is important, but the other 2 components are equally as important. Culture, preservation of our heritage, and lands are the other 2 components. So I always like to point out that lands is a really important part of our native corporations. You can look at our corporate structure as I mentioned. We obviously have a profitability component to it, but we also have a social component to it. And we're often considered to have a corporate mission, but acknowledging that we have a social component to it, looking after the Alaska Native people. And initially in the 70s and early 80s, Chugach focused on the 2 resources it had and it knew very well. It focused on fisheries, got into the commercial fishing industry, had canneries in the region, and it also got into the timber industry and sold timber. And over time, since 1971, the corporation and all native corporations in Alaska have really evolved. And our corporation now has close to 5,000 people that are spread across the globe. We're a diverse corporation that provides government contracting. We have a commercial holdings company and portfolio that provides oil support. We also provide oil spill response, and we have a number of other companies, including HVAC and electrical companies. But we also have a regional development component to our corporation, and I'm pleased that our president, Catherine Carlton, is joining us here today, and part of her mission, her responsibility is the regional development component, which focuses on energy and transportation and housing issues in our region. So, thank you.
Thank you, Jack. Yeah, I feel like I've been on this refreshing journey of seeing all these beautiful landscapes and hearing about these very, very unique places. So I want to go ahead and open up the conversation a little bit and ask, even though many of the benefits have already been described, so maybe this is one we can explore a little bit and then shift over to some of the other questions. But, you know, like, why carbon? What is it about carbon in particular that has benefited these communities? Like, why is carbon important for these communities? ¿Por qué importa el carbón? Vamos a buscar quizás 1 o 2 respuestas. Bryan, you're making faces, so I
can
have
start.
thoughts.
Again, you know, when I was doing my introduction, for so long on tribal and indigenous lands. It's exploitation. Individuals, outside parties coming in, talking to tribal leaders, tribal members, indigenous communities saying, we're gonna do this for you, and this is gonna be the greatest thing of all time. You're gonna make a bunch of money. And it never comes to fruition. We're always taken advantage of, whether it be mining, logging, gaming, in our instance in Indian country, for whatever reason, and a lot of times for reasons that we do now understand, it just was never a positive experience. And now as we're starting to see how these new ecosystem marketplaces are working, which there's another element of that, which they were not designed for tribal nations or indigenous communities. So we have to have a seat at the table when these marketplaces and policies and protocols and methodologies are being designed, because they were, again, not designed for our lands and for our peoples. But we are starting to see how they are truly benefiting our land bases. And as we can figure out how they work for our benefit, we can then implement them onto our land bases and ensure that these land bases and these natural resources are protected and preserved for future generations. And as we see, and again, in our video that we did with the Boys for Band of Chippewa and the leadership and membership, that they talked about how they saw this was important for their lands and for their community. And we've seen in the other videos of the importance of protecting their lands and how it's benefiting their community members of keeping these resources in the ground. That's where we're starting to see the benefit of these of these carbon projects, not only with the carbon projects themselves, but then with the co-benefits that come with that, the soil, air, water quality. We also are tracking the cultural and social economical factors that come with that, with additional benefits, and how we are able to then increase the price on those carbon credits by looking at those factors as well. So there's all these different ecosystem marketplaces that are starting to come into play. And as now indigenous communities, tribal nations have a seat at the table to discuss how these are showing benefits to all of you in the room, and how, if they're designed with our input and you talk to us, and we can show you that if you ask us questions and let us lead you down the path of how we can show you why these are beneficial for our land bases, and we work and collaborate together, not just you come in and tell us how these are going to be beneficial for us, but truly have a collaboration, then we think that these are going to be important, not only, again, for the tribal and indigenous lands, but for the industry as a whole. So that's where we're going. We've been doing this now for 8 years at the National Decarbon Coalition. We have 5 projects in our portfolio. We're adding 7 more to this calendar year. There's a lot of strong interest that we see with tribal nations and indigenous communities, Alaska Native Village corporations, First Nations that we've engaged with in Canada. This is coming. We need to do this work. We need to do it appropriately and correctly. We need to engage with the community members, with the tribal nations, to ensure that they see the benefit before anything moves forward. But again, we think that this is an important work to be done on these tribal and indigenous lands, which I'm sure each one of everybody up here will say something very similar, I believe. So that's our direction that we're heading in at the work that we're doing with our organization and the groups that we engage with.
I thought it was especially powerful in the video how they mentioned that, you know, the carbon funding was the mechanism that enabled the land expansion, the land acquisition, if I understood that correctly.
Correct. So that's the intent is utilizing carbon revenue for land acquisition. How do we fund these opportunities to reacquire land that was lost or stolen over time within our tribal reservations? So we call it took and crook. It was not always done the most appropriate way when we lost our lands because it was usually done by nefarious actors. So this is what we're trying to do, is how do we reacquire those lands that were lost through those actions, and we are finding that through carbon revenue generation, we can acquire that land, build a carbon project on it, take back that land, rematriate it to its original status, and protect and preserve that land for future generations.
And this makes me think your comment that the projects were often not designed with tribal lands in mind. In Mexico, there was more of a matching of the protocol, at least under CAR, to the land ownership structure, at least in Mexico. I don't know, Rosendo, if you have a comment to build on that. It's a little bit of maybe alignment or contrast with Bryan's comment.
I will try to summarize this, and I will try to use a more philosophical approach why carbon is important for these projects. We have less than 10 minutes. We have around 10 minutes, and it's a very long story. I will try to be very brief about this. Back in the 60s and 70s, land in Mexico, especially forests, were concessioned, even when communities still retained the ownership of the land. And was in Oaxaca where the fight for against concessions started back in '85. And the communities decided that they wanted to do a forest management that was in accordance with their values and their culture. So carbon fits very well with communities, with indigenous communities in Mexico, just because it aligns to the vision of conserving, but also ensuring that those natural resources will be available for the next generation. And especially now that there is a lot of concern about additionality, carbon offsets for the Mexican context at least is pretty much the best suitable scenario for some of these communities, because if we are trying to extend the rotation of forests, I think that just to prove additionality, and I think that John, that is here present, has experienced how indigenous communities in Oaxaca do forest harvesting, and he has pointed out a lot of very good things that need to be considered for continuing strengthening the Mexico Forest Protocol. I think that if the forest management vision with the communities involved and using carbon offsets aligned with that vision can prove that a lot of things can be done in order to conserve the ecosystem while also doing an active conservation, which means that the communities will still retain access to the natural resources, will be able to harvest the forest, will be able to get or create income from that harvesting, but also maintaining the proceeds from carbon offsets. And that's gonna improve the income for those communities, and that can increase alongside with also the funds they receive from government, the livelihoods of the people in these communities. So again, I think that given the time constraints and things, a lot of points may have got lost in translation. But yeah, I think that when projects are well implemented, when the vision of the community is taken into consideration, and you try to create the perfect scenario for these communities to thrive with carbon offsets is a good alternative that will add to what the communities, at least in Mexico, are doing already.
Thank you. So a lot to pack in there, but I don't know, algún otro comentario, another comment? I know we have other good questions to get to, but I don't want to rush us. ¿Seguimos? Okay. So I kind of want to flip this the other way. So we talked about, the ways very briefly in which carbon projects can benefit the communities. I kind of want to ask, and this is the question I'm most curious about actually, what particular aspects of the communities you work with strengthen the carbon project in a unique way? ¿Qué hay de las comunidades que es como un toque especial, una traducción, costumbre, que hace más fuerte el programa de carbono? For example, in the video we watched from the Boys Fort Chippewa, they mentioned, okay, so we know we need some big trees to keep the snow off of some areas so the deer can rest. I'm from Florida, I would never have thought of that in 100 million years. But that to me is the sort of approach or knowledge that would make the management of land stronger than if it were, a company or maybe a private landowner who doesn't have the same knowledge of a land. So I don't know who wants to start with that. Maybe someone who didn't comment on the last question.
Okay.
Gregorio.
Pues nosotros nos consideramos una comunidad muy organizada que al momento de decidir la aprobación de este proyecto, como sesiona mes con mes la asamblea para organizarse, eso ya viene siendo como parte de una costumbre muy buena que ha facilitado el éxito de muchos proyectos.
We consider ourselves an extremely organized community, and we meet, repeatedly every month to discuss the aspects of the project.
Y cuando nace la idea de llevar a cabo este proyecto, lo viene a reforzar esta práctica que ya venimos haciendo, refuerza porque empieza a cambiar en la comunidad, en los miembros de la comunidad, la forma de pensar, no solamente en que íbamos a obtener un recurso económico, sino que este proyecto refuerza la costumbre, a la forma de organizar que tenemos en pensar en 100 años de conservación de un proyecto.
And when the carbon project started, it actually backed up or reinforced this practice of meeting regularly, not just because there was income coming in, but it kind of forced those regular meetings, and that helped form a vision of, 100-year management.
Una de las principales fortalezas que tenemos, pues, es la organización. Somos una comunidad que ha pasado por muchas situaciones, que la clave es la organización, y pues aún este proceso que llevamos, que no hemos obtenido recursos económicos aún, la comunidad sigue con la idea de que debemos de continuar invirtiendo al bosque como que si estuviéramos obteniendo un recurso de la venta de créditos.
And we're a community that's gone through a lot of situations in which the organization has really been key. And even in a time of some challenges where we're not seeing the income that we would like to be seeing from the project, the community is of the mind to continue investing in the project and in its forest management.
Nosotros tenemos un lema, y el lema viene siendo que nuestro mundo es el bosque. Cuando nosotros pensamos en que, si escucharon en el video, muchos mencionan que queremos heredar para nuestros hijos, para nuestros nietos. Nuestra comunidad siempre ha pensado en que todo lo que ha realizado es a largo plazo, y que pues en realidad vivimos del bosque, estamos orgullosos del bosque.
We have a saying in our community that our world is the forest, and in the video you hear again and again people talking about the next generation and this mindset of living within the forest.
Okay.
Bueno. Any other comments on this? Then maybe we'll do a rapid fire final round. It'll be like a hot seat approach.
Okay.
Jack, any thoughts?
Sure, just a couple points to add from Chugach's perspective. Innovative forest management strategies through carbon sequestration have really been a positive benefit for our corporations and our corporation and our shareholders. It's provided financial benefits while allowing for traditional subsistence uses to occur. We have retired a coal field, 62,000 acres of coal field was retired in 2017, and then that was kind of our first carbon project that we successfully accomplished. And then in 2020 and 21, we sold 6.4 million CCOs and over 50,000 acres of land. So we continue to explore opportunities for carbon, but some of the things wanted to briefly point out some of the benefits that we've seen. The Alaska Natives have benefited as shareholders of this company, and one of the great aspects was being able to take $30 million from our carbon sales and to put it into an endowment, the Chugach Heritage Foundation. And that endowment helps support educational opportunities, cultural aspects for our shareholders. It also helps support a culture camp, which we operate in Prince William Sound, and it's one of the largest camps in Alaska. And so it's great to see the young high school kids at camp for a week, learning traditional uses and learning more about their cultures. So we've really seen a benefit from carbon. And we continue to look at opportunities to further our explore.
Fantastic. I want to talk with you afterwards about culture camp and whether, I don't know, sounds fascinating. Anyway, I suppose I can't attend. That's probably fine. But, okay, let's do a hot seat final round. So your best take on what you would like to be part of the conversation when people talk about Indigenous managed carbon projects, or what you feel like is not part of the general discussion that should be. Vamos a ir rapidito, su pensamiento más resumido de qué debe ser parte de la conversación sobre los proyectos indígenas o locales de carbono forestal. All right, we're going to start with you, Bryan.
My number one thing I will always recommend to organizations that want to engage with tribal nations or indigenous communities is listen, because many times people want to come in and lead, but you have to understand what those indigenous communities truly want out of these projects. So listen to what they're telling you that they want to do, and then you can have that dialogue and that conversation.
All right, thank you. Gregorio.
Pues yo considero que el mercado voluntario de carbono es una buena oportunidad para las comunidades y los ejidos de México, y que si bien he escuchado estos días que se requiere un proceso para la venta, un análisis, unas nuevas calificaciones, la verdad yo pediría que esos análisis, esas empresas que realizan eso, yo entiendo que se basan en ciencia, se basan en datos, pero tienen también que basarse un poco en las costumbres de México, en cómo la forma podemos proyectar hacia un futuro que tengan éxito. Si falta adicionalidad, cómo poder ayudar a estas comunidades a que lo cumplan.
Yes. I consider the voluntary carbon market to be a very good opportunity for the ejidos and comunidades of Mexico. I understand that projects or companies that are buying credits need to go through a process. I understand that there are ratings agencies and all sorts of organizations, that are analyzing these projects on the basis of facts and science. But I also would ask that they base it a little bit in a knowledge of the culture of Mexico. And that if there are weak points in different aspects, or if there's a view on additionality or things that could be improved, that we, take that journey to work on improving them.
Yo creo que hoy más que nunca las comunidades debemos empoderarnos de nuestro territorio. Vivimos ahí, pero no estábamos empoderados. Ya lo estamos haciendo, respetando nuestras costumbres, cuidando la biodiversidad. Nosotros no estábamos acostumbrados a cuidar la biodiversidad. Llegan los proyectos de carbono y estamos valorando lo que tenemos, nuestra tierra, nuestra gente, nuestra comida, nuestras costumbres, y esto ha permitido que los proyectos tengan éxito. Entonces, el amor a la tierra y el amor a la gente es lo que nosotros estamos promoviendo para que los proyectos tengan éxito. Tan es así que en el área que trabajamos, el tiempo de sequía ha sido largo y no hemos tenido incendios. ¿Por qué? Porque ya quiero lo que tengo, lo cuido y cuido a mi vecino para que también él se empodere de su territorio. Lo dije.
Chea says, I think we need to be more empowered in terms of our management of the places where we live, we live there, but sometimes we don't have the feeling, I guess, of ownership that maybe we could or should have. We find that the carbon projects help us to value different aspects that sometimes we weren't paying so much attention to before, like the biodiversity aspects of our projects or the customs and traditions. And that this is helping us, for example, currently we're experiencing some drought, and it puts more attention, for example, on fire management. So I'm watching my agricultural burns, and I'm watching my neighbor's agricultural burns, et cetera, and we haven't had forest fires. So these are some of the ways that the carbon projects are helping with that.
Okay, I've said this in the past. I think that the market needs to understand that communities doesn't work in 12-month cycles. Communities are very complex social systems, and in order to have effective use of carbon proceeds, I think that the community's challenges and areas of opportunity need to be correctly assessed, and that takes time. So sometimes companies and buyers want the effects of their investments from one year to the next. And given the complexity of these social systems, sometimes it's very difficult to prove that some funds that were developed or were given to the community one year will have an immediate effect the next year. So I think that we need to be more patient in terms of seeing the effects, the positive effects of climate funding to communities. And also we need to understand that communities, given this complexity, they need more time to take decisions and fulfill a very, very successful decision-making process.
A few things I'd like to leave you with. Self-determination, intergenerational prosperity. And that's one thing that benefit that I see from carbon programs. The example of the Chugach Heritage Foundation, we have an endowment that will be there for generations to come. The last item that one of the lessons that we've learned is the need for education. That ties in with what Bryan was saying with communication and listening, but specifically education. Carbon is hard for people to understand. If you walk into the room here and you had no idea what carbon was all about, it's hard to grasp. And so we have new leaders, new executives, and new board members that aren't familiar with this. They weren't around for the last project. And then finally, we report to shareholders, and it's vital and critical to have an educational and outreach component with our shareholders who are our stakeholders.
Okay, well, thank you so much. I really do actually wish we had more time, but thank you all for your patience. And thank you again, everyone, for coming, for sharing, for coming all this distance. Please join me in thanking them.